Encryption. I'm not sure whether I want to be encryption. It's like a lot. Yeah. That's right. And IPv6. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've seen it in specification, never in a rollout. No, IPv6, I think this is about men. There's the don't think the encryption is you should just see SS, not the real encryption. And basically, the manufacturer can say, encryption. Okay, shit. But then you look at it. Oh, yeah, no worries. I'll be
Yeah, not doing DTLS yet.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a project.
Oh, okay.
Roll recline organ.
Okay. All right.
Let's see what's going on.
All right. Now let's get started. Okay, this is Sipcore. Yes, 7:40. It says it's time to start. 17:40. Yeah, all right. Here we go. Blue sheets. You're not here, okay. We'll start here. Andrew, you're first. You lucky dog. Gene can't be with us today, so I'm flying solo. We have a pretty short agenda, but let's start with Notewell. It's only your third or fourth session, so you don't know what Notewell is yet, right? Nah. Please do pay attention, and everything you say can and will be used against you. So our agenda is short. We'll talk for a minute about where we are with drafts, authn, and digest. We'll have some short discussions of, see if we can move them forward. And then we have a session on push with Krister, and that's it. Any discussion of the agenda? I do have a scribe, thank you very much. Could use a note taker, could use a Jabber scribe. Is there someone in the Jabber room? Not expecting lots to go on in the Jabber room today, but if there's somebody in the Jabber room, I'd appreciate it if you'd scribe for us. There's somebody can do that? Okay, yeah, you shouldn't do both. Yeah. Can someone else jump on the Jabber room just to watch what's going on? Let me know if something happens. I'll pick it up. Okay. Drafts. So I've talked to the author of CDiv, and they'd like to working group last call it. They think it's ready to go. It's been hanging around for a while. I probably will want to get some people to do, chairs will want to get some more reviews done, so we'll want to hook people up. But anyone not going to object to starting working group last call on CDiv pretty soon? Yeah, yeah, whatever. No, anybody object to? I don't expect it. Q850 reason also very, yes.
This is Ben Campbell. Just wanted to point out that came up during the 3GPP coordination meeting at lunch today as something that is a 3GPP dependency.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. So we will move forward with it. And Q850, same state. Authors think the draft is okay, simple thing, no objections, and they want to get to work group last call. So again, we'll probably do that pretty soon. If you have been paying attention to the list, you know that session timer is a very active discussion. Clearly something we have to get done correctly. And I sense that we're converging, right? I mean, I think we're getting to the place where everybody's kind of okay. Still some discussion. It's not died down yet, but I think we're heading in the right direction. Behooves us to get this right. So let's make sure everybody's got it right before we go ahead and do it. Authn, we have a discussion today. And call info. Henning is coming later this week, so he couldn't present, but he does think it's pretty much done. Anybody believe that we should be hanging around waiting for things to happen with call info spam? We had the discussion. I think it's converged, and I think we're okay. All right, we'll probably do the older ones first. Yes.
This is Ben Campbell. Does it's done mean ready for working group last call or something different?
No, I think it's probably ready for working group last call.
Okay.
I want to do the CDIV and Q850s first, just because they've been around longer. Get it done. But I'll talk to Gene, of course. But I believe that we'll run it. We'll start running it pretty soon. Any other discussion on drafts? All righty then. Yes.
Just one question with regard to the location draft I have discussed during the list. It's still a private draft, so with my name, and I would like to know how to proceed now, because there's also open liaison from Etsy coming, because they need the stuff.
Yes. We will call, we've got a pretty light group here, so I think asking for adoption in the room is probably not worth it, but we will probably do it on the list. Call for adoption on the list soon. What is it called? I forgot what it's called. It's
That's the Winterbottom draft,
right?
Winterbottom log param.
Yeah, log param. So that'll happen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else on drafts? Okay, fine.
Digest? Start with digest.
Yeah, please.
Hang on 1 second.
Simple.
Get it up.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so some context to this work. There is that 7616. It's an update to the HTTP digest mechanism. It did update few aspects to that mechanism. It added a few algorithms. Kept MD5 as a backward compatibility algorithm, but added SHA-256 as the default algorithm. It mandated the use of QRP parameter and create an IANA registry for new algorithms. Next slide, please. Oh. So the idea of this draft is just to follow what was done with that HTTP digest mechanism. Just use the same algorithms, update the SIP ABNF, and follow the same recommendations. Next slide, please. Last time we discussed this, there was some discussion about forking and how we want to handle that. So, and the feedback was just keep it as it is. Don't change anything. Let the proxies, the SIP proxy, just aggregate those into a single response and expect the client to provide responses to those challenges. Next slide, please. So. This has been there for some time. I think personally, I think it's ready. Like it's I'm not aware of any open issues, and I'm actually there was one suggestion for adding some internationalizations to this document. I didn't see anybody interested in that, so we said okay, no interest. So I'm not going to work on that. So. My question is, are there any open issues with this document that people are aware of it? And if not, can we adopt this as a work group document?
Any discussion?
Wolfgang Beck, Deutsche Telekom. Do you really think that an updated HTTP digest authentication will be implemented by anyone? I remember like 12 years ago, there was a proposal to do a proper digest for SIP, and even then it was rejected simply for the reason you can use TLS and BASIC, and it's more secure than using.
Yeah, but I don't.
mechanisms.
I agree, like that TLS is useful, but that doesn't mean that this doesn't add to the security of that solution, right? So yes, you can use digest on top of TLS. That doesn't mean that it doesn't add value, right? And yes, people are interested in implementing this, right?
And right now we have such a large number of devices out there and libraries out there. I don't think people will do very much to implement such a thing. But
maybe. Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I mean, we can call for working group adoption and see what we get. If we get nobody saying they want it, then that'll handle it. Asking for working group adoption is an easy thing.
Right.
Certainly, we're willing to ask.
Yeah,
You have to live with whatever the response is. If the response
absolutely.
is, let's move forward, that's what we'll do.
Absolutely. We've been discussing this for some time. If there's no interest, nobody cares. Sure.
Okay.
Well, let's kill it.
We'll do that.
Stop.
All right.
Stop working on it.
Well,
Right.
we will put out, I mean, again, I will take it to the list.
Yeah.
Take it to my co-chair first, but likely you'll see should we adopt question soon.
Okay.
All right?
Next one.
All right.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just some context about this. So this is a mechanism that we want to allow user agent to use non-SIP credentials to get access to SIP services. This would enable a single sign-on feature where the user is expected to use one set of credentials to access SIP and non-SIP services. Next slide, please. So similar to the OAuth RFC, which defines two types of clients, one confidential and public clients. Here we're talking about confidential UA, which is a user agent that's capable of maintaining the security of the credentials and tokens provided to that user agent. Public UA cannot guarantee that. Next slide, please. So there are few use cases that are discussed in this draft. So there is what comes into play also the user interface on those devices. So there's in this specific use case we're talking about public UA with rich UI. So the public UA cannot keep those tokens locally. So it's going to be handed to the proxy only to handle that. So in this case, the use case is the user agent tries to register. It gets rejected because there is no credentials. There is a location header here. And this is one of the open questions that we have. We'll discuss later on. The user agent then uses the OAuth mechanism, which is out of scope of this document, but it's an existing mechanism, which is the OAuth protocol, to obtain an authorization code, then uses that authorization code to register again. The proxy will use that authorization token and exchange that for tokens, and then okay that registration. At the end, we create a shared key based on the authorization code and the call ID, the from tag, and the to tag from that 200 OK. And we will see why we need this later on. Next slide, please. So in this use case, there is a public UA, but it has very limited UI. In this case, we're talking about a user that has access to a phone and a user agent and a browser. So the user will go to the browser and log in into the authorization server and obtain a short-lived numeric access code, and then we'll punch that code into the user agent. That will be collected and sent in the registration request to the proxy. The proxy will exchange that for tokens and okays the registration. And again, at the end, we have that shared key that's created. Next slide, please. Now, that shared key is used to kind of allow the user agent to re-register or establish a communication with the proxy if that connection failed for some reason. So without really requiring the user to provide his credential again. Obviously, the proxy can invalidate that shared key anytime and require the user to go and validate itself, or authenticate and validate itself. Next slide, please. In this case, this is a confidential UA with rich UI. The user agent goes directly to the authorization server using the authentication mechanism, existing mechanism, which is out of scope, obtains access token, and then register using that access token. The proxy could add an introspection step. This is an optional, and then okays that registration. In this case, there's no need for shared token because the user agent already have access to the access token, so it will use that all the time. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a few open issues that I'm hoping to get some feedback here. In one use case, we're talking about 401 with location header. There is no location header currently defined in SIP, so there is a location header for HTTP. So I'm kind of suggesting we do something like that to indicate the authorization server. So that's I would like to get some feedback from here if that makes sense, or if there are other suggestions. That proof position calculation, we use a digest string that is defined by 4474. Is that reasonable? Anybody has any other suggestions if there is any problem with that? And for now, we use that POP for re-registrations. Do we recommend to use that for all requests from the user agent to the proxy, or just keep it limited to the re-registration? So these are kind of the open issues that we're hoping to get some feedback here. Your thoughts?
Wolfgang Beck, having a déjà vu again. John Peterson tried to standardize something like this a couple of years ago. He still tries to standardize this under the guise of, in the Stir working group, under the guise of providing secure originating numbers, which doesn't work in my opinion, but it's basically a third-party authentication scheme. And this can work, and it's interesting work, but I guess there is a big overlap between your proposal and the proposal of John Peterson in his various drafts over the last couple of years. So yes, I think that's useful work.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there was some earlier work, but it doesn't overlap with the current Stir work, right? It's just that old thing that he tried to do a while ago. Yeah, true.
Any feedback on?
It is an adopted draft.
Yes.
So we thought that at one point, we thought it was worth doing.
Any thoughts on open issues like?
Right.
That's what I'm hoping to get out there.
Right. So what do you want to do? Remind me what you want to do with the location. What is it? What's the issue?
So if you go back to, let me see, go back a few slides. One more. Yeah, here. So the user agents try to register, right? And the proxy is telling go and first authenticate.
Yeah.
Where to go is that location, right? I'm telling go. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the authorization server. Go there, authenticate, and come back.
Yeah.
Right? but it's not contacts, right? So yeah, I don't want to overload that. I think it's not the right thing to do, but again, I'm open to whatever.
So to repeat what I said for the mic, I said that kind of sounds like contact, because it's describing where you should go for this thing, and and contact already means at least 3 different things, so why not a 4th? So, I mean, the other reason I thought of that is because being you can see I'm getting an increasing amount of gray in my beard here. In the early design of SIP, contact was location until we figured out it needed to be name, adder, form, and location was just adder spec, so we renamed it. So, I mean, it seems, I doubt there's very much pre-2543 code still running out there that would get confused.
Okay.
But, I mean, it just, I don't know, I mean, how confused would existing things be getting a contact in a 401?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Okay, we'll consider that option. Okay. Anybody has any thoughts? Other thoughts? Okay. Anyway, I'll
see if you can generate some list
Some
discussion
list,
on
yeah.
these issues.
Okay.
Get them cleared, and then again, we'll, in the same sense that we can ask for working group last call. If we get no comments, then that's an indication of what's going on.
Yeah,
But,
hopefully not.
Generating list discussion and getting this finished or off the table is what we want to do. I don't want to
Okay.
just let it sit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we'll
we'll do that.
this draft's been hanging around with nothing going on for a long time. I want to either get it off the table one way or another, either get it through the process or drop it.
Okay.
Krista, do you have something? No. Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else
And-
on this draft? Thank you.
Okay.
That's
Thanks.
what we'll do. You're up, Krista. Get rid of the thumbnails. Whatever. Just keep going. I'll figure it out.
Okay, so this is something called SIP push. Please go to the next slide. And one thing I want to make clear from the beginning is to say what this is and what it's not. This is not a new push notification mechanism using SIP. That's not what this is about. This is about a mechanism for transporting push notification parameters between a push subscriber, which would typically be a SIP UA, and a push notifier, a SIP proxy, what I call it, using SIP for usage with existing push notification services. For example, you have Apple push notification, APNS, you have Firebase Cloud, you have RFC 8030 base, etc. So again, we're not defining a new push mechanism here. So next slide. So then what's the problem? The problem is that previously, when you made VoIP application or when you made iOS applications, this is at the moment this is a problem in iOS. Is that there was a mode which was called VoIP mode actually, which means that when an application was in sleeping mode or suspended mode, it could be woken up when there was a network message. In the SIP case, that would be an incoming invite. So the application woke up, processed the invite, and everything was fine. Now, in latest versions of iOS, that has been removed. So basically, the only thing is that the only way you can wake up a suspended application is, of course, either pressing the icon on the phone, but you have but otherwise, the only way is to use this push notification. Which means that if you have an incoming invite and your application is suspended, it's not going to be able to handle that, and things won't work. Android has something similar. Currently, they don't mandate the usage of a push mechanism. You can still send the invite to the Android phone and the application will wake up. However, they do recommend usage of a push also in order to wake up applications. So who knows? Sooner or later, they may actually adopt the same thing. I got some text there. There's even a link there where you can see the official note from Apple. I tried this link 5 minutes ago, and it actually works. So this is kind of background why this is needed. So next slide, please. So this is basically a picture showing the thing we want to do. You have the subscriber there, which is in our case again a SIP UA. I think the red text or the red arrows here are actually SIP messages. The blue arrows of other protocols, which are outside the scope of what we want to do here. Normally, they are based on HTTP, but it could be something else. So you have your application. It's subscribed to a notification event from the service. It gets back. I call it a push resource ID, PRID, in this document because I want to make a generic solution. So if you're familiar with Apple, for example, they call it something else. Firebase calls it on something else, and so on. But I thought this was a good generic term. As I will say later, when you define the usage for a specific service, you will actually have to map this to that specific service, so implementers know what it is. Now, the idea here is that then when you get this and when you send your register, you're actually going to include this information in your SIP register request. And after you've done that, at some points, the voice application is suspended because you may use some other application. And then at some point, there's going to be one trigger. This could be, or a typical case is this is a SIP invite, but it could also be, for example, that the networks requires that you have to do a re-registration or something like that. So you get this trigger, the proxy, which takes care of this, gets it. It sends a push message. Again, includes this PRID and some additional information, which is service specific. The push notification service gets this, forwards it to the SIP UA. The SIP UA wakes up, and then when this invite is forwarded, it will be able to receive it and set up the call and everything like that. So things work. But if you would just forward the SIP invite, it would not, the UA would not be able to receive it. So next slide, please. This is the same thing, and here I'm trying to show actually what the scope of the draft is. It's basically distributing these parameters to this proxy or the publisher notifier. That's what it's all about. Again, we're not touching the existing services or the push services or anything like that.
Krister?
Yep.
Imagine I'm in the back there.
Okay.
But is there not a timing issue with how long it takes to wake it up before you get the invite? And is there not something that needs to be done there?
Actually, according to the people I talked to, this actually goes very quickly. You could, of course, I mean, if there could also be, you could hold on for this invite for a while before you forward. Exactly.
As opposed to having another message going out saying, I've gotten it, I'm woken.
Okay. I don't have that in slides, but you have to remember that there could be a NAT or something in between. So you need to send this register in open to open this NAT binding again. So there is actually in the draft there is a NAT consideration section which talks about that. So
Jonathan Lennox. So I don't know how much information you can carry in the push notification, but would it be possible to just tunnel the invite over the push notification itself?
Yeah, that's I'm coming back to that. Yes, actually no. Well, let's put it this way: there are a few reasons why you can't do that. First, it's very ugly. Second, you have to remember that even though there could be other proxies between the UA and this proxy, which means and they are never going to see the invite, but then suddenly they will start seeing 180x responses or something like that, and that wouldn't work. And the third reason is that I don't remember the exact numbers, but the payload that you can include in this push message is very limited. So I don't think you would even fit the invite there with a lot of STP. So yeah. But again, that has been suggested. There are suggestions to do it that way, but that's not the intention here. Yeah. And I have explicit text about this in the draft because I think Martin Thompson asked to include that text. Yeah.
So this is Ben Campbell up here as an individual. I want to push a little more on what Brian was saying. You have a race condition right now between the trigger and the the push message and the SIP message, and making time your solution doesn't seem like a general solution. And it also occurs to me that this is almost isomorphic to things we've done before when it comes to trying to identify with some token a particular way to get to the user agent. It feels kind of like outbound and some of those things that we've done before. So what this comes down is a scope question about how much this draft needs to worry about how you know when the client is ready to receive the triggering thing. And there's transaction timing issues there too, right? Particularly for if it's a non-invite, if this is a message or a notifier, or something.
Again,
you can't just camp on this message and expect the transaction to survive.
No, again, as far as I understand, this goes very quickly, and I also believe that in some cases, there is actually the publisher is actually going to get a message back when the message has been delivered. I don't know if both Apple and Firebase and all those support, and then in that case, you could of course wait for that and until you forward the invite. But I don't think transaction timers or things like that is going to be an issue because this happens very quickly. So.
What do you mean by very quickly when you're having to send a message out to a third-party host that's going to get around to delivering it when it can?
Sorry, I didn't.
So when you're sending your push request off to a push notification server that you don't control, it's across probably the internet, and it's going to get to this push notification when it can, depending on how busy it is. What do we mean by very quick?
I don't have numbers, but what I've been told is that we're talking about milliseconds or so. So it's that.
Right. I can't imagine how we can. Maybe this is true in practice a lot of the time, but I can't imagine how we could reasonably guarantee that, or anyone could reasonably guarantee
Sure,
that.
we can't guarantee, but there can also be something can always go wrong. It's the same thing, even in cases where you forward the invite, maybe it gets lost somewhere, the network doesn't work. You're always going to have that case when there are delays in the network, and I mean, of course, things can go wrong if.
And then let me wind up. What I was really up here for is, to me, this is a scope question when we talk about adopting the work, about whether or not how much work this draft needs to do on solving the potential connectivity issues. I can see it saying, oh yes, these things could exist and maybe you need to be an outbound server proxy or any number of things, or I can see it going into detail with normative stuff, and I think either might be reasonable, but we kind of need to know what we're starting out, what we mean to do when we start out.
I mean, the whole idea, of course, this is for the community to decide. I wouldn't really like to go into too much details regarding normative, what the UE has to do, and those kind of things. This is about, waking up the application, and again, currently, I don't even suggest to include in this push message why it has to be. It could be a re-registration, or it could be a invite. If someone thinks there's a need to include actually why this comes, they can do it. But I don't think we need to standardize that. That's just going to be additional information that you can send payload in this push message, but we don't specify the payload you have to include there. It's application specific. Sorry.
Wolfgang Beck. One reason not to include SIP-specific information into the push is data protection. We can't disclose code numbers to third parties like Apple and Google.
Yeah.
They will know anyway, but
that's a very good point, and that's actually something which is in the draft is privacy, because you're not going to send any user information or SIP private. I mean, the only thing you're going to send up to the push notification service is what you normally would send up when you do your registration. You're not going to send any SIP identities or anything like that. The push notification service may not even know that this is for SIP. It's just a subscription, and when someone triggers, I'm going to send this down to him. Actually, even if you're concerned about the payload that can be included, what the drafts also, and this was requested by Martin Thompson, it actually references this Martin's web push security draft, which allows you to have basically end-to-end encryption of the payload. It's not needed for this mechanism to work, but it was added there by his request, and I think it's a good feature to have in case someone wants to use it.
Regarding the other comment, we have such a system, and it works simply. The user agent wakes up and registers itself at the system, and then it gets a call.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the
idea here, that you have to send something, at least if you have a NAT there, you need to open a NAT binding. So
but there is really a significant delay between the invite triggering the notification towards the user agent and the user agent waking up and being ready. So this can take some time.
It can't, that's good, but I mean, this is something, I mean,
The general problem is that we have seen with usability tests, I said in the usability lab, the user was instructed to install the application, and there was, do you want this application to have push notification? No.
Sure, but that of course you can always configure or do something so that it doesn't work, but that's true for any application. You can screw up things by that.
Hi, Sean Leonard. So I don't usually participate in the SIP stuff. However, as a recent pretty intense SIP end user, I guess, I see that there's a lot of promise for this draft. And I would like to see more. I actually read the draft and I didn't see where it discusses the problems with including SIP payload information in the push notification. So maybe I missed it, but I did just read the draft.
It's not there, but it's a good comment. Okay. I think it would be useful to actually include that, because I have received that question from
this discussion has to become part of the draft.
Yes,
right.
Because I have received that question from quite many actually. So I will include. Yeah.
Okay, because my impression or my view actually, without maybe having all the experience with all the dragons or whatever, is that it's much more powerful to have the option of including the SIP invite payload data in the push notification if it can be included. As to the issue of size, I don't know. I don't know what the exact limitations are of push notification size, but some invites are going to be smaller or larger than others. And as for the issue of security, there's like actually 3 or 4 ways to do multiple levels of encryption. One is that I understand that Apple's push notification implementation has some sort of end-to-end security or encryption feature, which depends on how much you trust Apple and their implementation.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, I mean, these messages here, the push messages itself, they are obviously going to be encrypted, right? Because I think TLS, at least in Apple case.
Well, encrypted in transport, but I also thought that
exactly, but when this Martin Thompson's draft, that's actually the payload. So the push notification server is not going to be able to decrypt that. That will go end to end from there.
Right. Yeah, and I understand Apple's implementation of their push notification service also has end-to-end encryption, so that Apple's servers cannot see the payload of the push as well. So that's an advantage that would satisfy a lot of regulatory concerns about that and privacy concerns. And then the third thing is that Ben Campbell's one of the co-authors of a draft with Russ Housley on doing S-MIME-based end-to-end SIP encryption of messages. And I understand that there are other ways in SIP to do that as well. So if you don't trust the push notification services implementation of encryption, or if it's not satisfactory, you could encrypt those messages as well. And one of the other features of using S-MIME or CMS with SIP messages is that it is possible to compress the messages as well. So that may give you just enough, margin to be able to shove SIP invites into a push notification packet to compress it, encrypt it, and then send it along. So there's some interesting. My point is that there's a lot of interesting ways that this actually could be done, and ultimately reduce significantly the latency, right, of getting the VoIP app to complete the call.
I will include some text. I mean, if someone wants to do that, but I don't think the draft should be, because like I said, I think there's a lot of problems, for example, because 3261, for example, says that the response should be sent where the request came from, and you get this invite from here, and you have no idea. I mean, you may have a via header, but, you know, it's not always sure that, and I mean, I'd like to, you know, if someone wants to do that as an implementation issue, I don't know, but I think as far as the draft is concerned, you are at least going to forward this invite using SIP routing mechanisms. We don't want to change SIP or SIP routing, because that's just going to be a mess. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm standing here, because some of the suggestions I've seen, the priority suggestions, do those kind of things, and they have very specific assumption of how the network works. There are no proxies in between, and so on and so on. They make assumptions based on their deployments, but that's not going to work, you know, as a generic mechanism.
John Lennox. So, I mean, I think I confess to not having read your draft until just now when I pulled it up on my laptop. But the NAT considerations thing, I think, needs to be more fundamental, because designing a mechanism that only works for iPhones that aren't behind NATs or firewalls seems not very useful.
No, that's absolutely not the idea. I mean,
I don't know, but my point being that given that the solution of NATs and firewalls also solves the race condition, I maybe build that in. You know, you have to have something like outbound in there, period. You know, basically so that the invite is sent as soon as effectively you've re-registered. I feel like that solves both the race condition and the NAT and firewall problem. So maybe.
Right, but you don't have to say you must do this. You have to say, if there is a worry about blah, 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 then use this mechanism.
I mean, I mean, obviously we need more text in the draft.
Yeah.
I don't think we shouldn't do.
I guess my point is, I'm not sure. It feels like encouraging people to. I mean, and maybe nobody would, because they'd try it and it just wouldn't work. But encouraging people to write something that A, has a race condition, and B, doesn't work behind nuts and firewalls by just doing the simple version of this draft is, you know, not a useful not a useful guidance to the world.
Absolutely
Good
not.
point, but
This
let's
has
not
this
do the design
yeah.
here, because we don't know all of the pieces. So I think we've given Krister a lot of information here.
Right.
Let's go and see what he comes up with in the draft.
All right. And then my second question is, given that you said, you know, there's a lot of application-specific stuff, and obviously the PRIDs themselves are, is this actually something that needs to be standardized? It's just an informational draft saying this is how you use a PRID.
Well, we define new CPUized parameters here, which I will come to later. And
is this actually something that you expect to interop between subscribers and publishers from different vendors?
Yes, I do, because I mean, otherwise every vendor, every network vendor will have to discuss with each terminal vendor, and you're going to end up with a mess.
So there needs to be URIs to describe all
yes.
the services.
That's the problem.
And I'm actually going to mention the need for standardization in just a while. So
Yeah. Rafat, I think it's a very useful draft, but I still that concern with the delay, with the in this case you're talking about the application being suspended. In some cases it will be completely killed, and you have to relaunch the application. So it is a valid concern that we need to really think about, right?
Sure, and we need to have text about that also. So I think.
So this is Ben Campbell again, also as an individual again, and I'm going to try to take Brian's comment to heart to not try to dive too much into detail. I did want to point out, though, that the question about knowing when it's okay to send the request also applies to deciding if you need to send a push request in the first place. Because it could be entirely possible to deliver the message right now, and you may or may not know that. So the guidance kind of works. Whatever you talk about there needs to kind of think in both directions.
I mean, you can always forward the invite and see what happens, but then again, you're going to delay the push notification, or you can send both of them, and the application will have to. And if the application, when it gets the push notification, if it's already up and it has received the invite, I mean, those we need text about that, but I can't answer you. You know,
right. I think there's a number of ways to approach that. We don't have to decide right now.
Yeah.
once again, the answer is more text in the document.
Yeah.
Pose a solution and let us take that solution
Yeah,
apart.
yeah. So next slide, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just, what this draft is doing. It defines new CPUI parameters. There's been some comments on those, so I don't think we need to discuss the details of those, but this is what it does. It defines one URI parameter for carrying this PRID value, and then one parameter for this PN type, which this PN type actually, it includes, what service is this, Apple, Firebase, and so on. And then some service-specific parameters, because some services, they have, in addition to this, they have some extra information that you need to send, but this is service-specific. And then there are a couple of headers there which can be used by this draft IETF encryption in order to provide this information. And also there's a new IANA subregistry. I mean, we want to make this as a generic mechanism, so you can register in this PNS provider values. At the moment, this is only an issue with mobile terminals. So basically, we're going to have Apple and Firebase, and those are actually predefined in the draft. But we still want to make it generic if it also to allow for other services, so we don't have to write a new draft. So there's IANA registry and what kind of information you have to do for that. And the next slide, please. Yeah, this is just an example. You all know SIP, so I don't think we need to spend time on this one. So next one, please. Okay, so who needs this? And this is something which I want to stress, is that this is operators need a solution now, as we speak. I mean, I know both my company and other vendors are having discussions about this. And I think this is what I want to point out, that this is not a new feature that's put in a roadmap for a release at some point. At least as I'm concerned, or what I know, this is considered as a high priority bug fix, because you can't. I mean, there is a way. Yeah,
iOS change.
Yeah,
and there is no solution.
Exactly. There's a time issue. There are ways you can do this now. You can use the older versions of the iOS SDKs and things you can get. But that's, I mean, it's just a matter of time. Some of the operators have indicated on the list. There are also other operators who unfortunately don't participate in IETF that also need this. Like I said here a while ago, there's different ideas for proprietary non-interoperable solutions floating around. I mean, I've seen one, for example, was this include this in white, but there are also much more worse, which includes defining new interfaces, defining new nodes, defining application servers just for this. Really horrible. But the good thing is that these people, when you talk to them, they have said, the reason we have, because there is no standardized solution. So of course, everyone comes up with their self. But the message I got is that, yes, if there would be a standard solution, we can use that, because everyone realizes that having to do vendor specific and terminal specific in the long run, it's not going to work. It's going to be a big mess. Did you have a comment on that? Yeah.
We would have needed a solution a couple of years ago already. And the problem may be that too many non-standard implementations are already out there and consider it a solved problem because we don't touch our non-standard solution anymore. But yeah, it's something.
There may be some, and there's never anything we can do about that. But I also know that there are some which are not yet there, and there is a little time. I told them, look, we're working on this. Please, see what's happening.
I guess really the question is the question of scope. There's just this parameter, but of course the whole interworking. Do you consider this push subscription to have the same lifetime as the registration, or do they differ? And how do you handle that? Do you get a message from Google if the device gets broken or gets replaced?
No,
don't know.
Those are all good comments, and we need to have text on that. But I mean, I didn't want to, before we know if there's even interest to work on this. So next slide, please. I think that, yeah, basically, so my suggestion is that we adopt this, because I mean, like I said, this is needed. And it's needed yesterday or even earlier. So from a SIP perspective, it's a very simple thing. Again, It's just URI parameters. As we've seen there's a lot of text we want to do this, but it's not, rocket science, but it will have a big impact. It's something which is really needed. Thank you.
This has had a lot of list discussion. So there clearly is a lot of interest in it. So I think chairs are inclined to ask for adoption and a milestone and all that. We have to juggle when we're doing what. So, and Gene's not here, so we can't, but clearly this is hot. There's been a lot of list discussion. Any other comments? Any objections to having a call for adoption at this point? Clearly, there's work for you to do, right? You can
Sure,
keep going, right?
absolutely.
Don't wait. Just keep going, right? Okay. Yeah, I'll do it on the list. Yeah, it's too few people here, given the size of the group, to get anything interesting from the room.
This is Ben. I agree, do that on the list. And I'll also comment, as you said, we've got several things to do calls of adoptions on. Those can somewhat parallelize. They don't,
Yeah, right.
It's not like we're asking people to.
I don't want to have 5 of them running simultaneously, but we can have 2 or 3 running
Right.
simultaneously.
It's not like a working group last call where we expect everyone to
Right.
find all the problems right now.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Obviously, like you've seen, there is text to be added, but I think the good thing, if we get this adopted, we can tell the market, hey, there's going to be a solution
Yes.
for this,
No,
and
I agree.
I
I
think,
agree.
or
Good
that's
reason to
exact.
ask
Yes,
the
yes.
Got it. Understand. Anything else? That's our session. As you can tell from the discussion that we had here, thanks. There's a lot of work that has been hanging around, plus the 2 things, the session timer and push, that are currently occupying time on the list. And Gene and I are bound and determined to clear off our milestones one way or another. So all I'm saying is expect to need to do reviews and respond to messages and let us know about what you want to do and not do. And we're gonna try and clean the world up here.
Christy, I think you didn't mention it or I missed it, but we have actually published an RFC since the last meeting. So
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't mention it, I'm sorry, but yes, we've published an RFC. Thank you very much. We are moving ahead, and I've forgotten it. Which one did we do? Which one came out? Forgot.
It was content ID.
Content ID, there we go. Slipped my mind. But a few of the drafts have been hanging on a very long time. We want to clear those up. But I think this push is clearly hot, and we're probably going to, we will ask what the work group thinks about it, but I would not be too surprised if it gets stopped. Okay, anything else for discussion? Great, thank you very much. Blue sheets, anyone who's not signed the blue sheets? They're up here, both of them. Thanks, appreciate it. Terrific, great place for it. Appreciate it. Okay, that's that.
Chris, congratulations, your simple draft now is an interesting problem.
Huh?
Yeah, I said congratulations, your simple draft graduated to interesting problem.
Yeah.
Even though, like I said, it's not rocket science, but interesting because this is actually something that's needed. It's